Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. My name is Sarah Ann Minkin. I serve as the Director of Partnerships and Programs at the Foundation for Middle East Peace. Today, I'm so honored to be joined by Nareman Shehadeh Zoabi, joining us today from Nazareth. Nareman is a social and economic rights attorney working with Adalah, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel. I strongly urge all of our listeners to go to the Adalah website, make sure that you are signed up for their newsletters and that you follow them on social media. We will post links to all of that on the FMEP website. Thank you so much, Nareman, for making time to join us today during what I know is an intense and very busy time for you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So this week, Israel carried out mass arrests of Palestinian citizens of Israel who participated in protests over the past several weeks. Israel calls this Operation Law and Order and has said that they want to use this operation to, quote unquote, restore deterrence. They've already arrested hundreds. This is after the arrests over the last few weeks of 1,500 people, more than 1,500 people. Can you tell us what is happening?
Actually, what's happening is a little bit crazy. It's something that we've never witnessed before in very long years. As you've mentioned, we've witnessed more than 1,500 protesters, detainees throughout the last 2 weeks of demonstrations. The overall response of the Israeli police and other forces have been extremely violent to the demonstration. They aimed at aggressively dispersing the demonstrations and cracking down on the rights to freedom and expression, protest and assembly. It's a massive wave of arrests, most of the time accompanied with extreme violence toward protesters and detainees, arrests around the clock, at daytime and not at nighttime. Then came the declaration 2 days ago of the Operation Law and Order, a very provocative declaration, though the arrests did not stop anytime since the beginning of demonstrations. Now they declare that they are going to arrest another 500 Palestinians on the background of participating in the demonstrations. It's all aiming to frighten the Palestinians, youth and families, and to prevent them from exercising their basic rights to demonstrate and make their voices heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Adalah has written that this is, and now I'm quoting from Adalah, a militarized war against Palestinian citizens of Israel. These raids are intended to intimidate and to exact revenge on Palestinian citizens of Israel to settle the score with Palestinians. So what does that mean?
Listen, from the very beginning, Israel has declared that the demonstrations held by the Palestinians are illegal. Therefore, automatically, every protester was treated as a criminal and even as an enemy of the state. I have to mention that the arrests were not only performed by the police officers, but also by the Shabak. The Shabak was intervening in the arrest, which is considered an escalation in the state's treatment of its citizens. Shabak arrest automatically leads to violations of the fundamental rights of the detainees. Still, the state saw it as a proportionate mean of dealing with the demonstrations. What happened through the passing couple of weeks, it is declaring a war against the Palestinian citizens, and I have to mention that just today, Adalah sent a letter to Attorney General and other authorities demanding that the operation should stop immediately due its illegal purpose. We argued that the state cannot arrest as a deterrent, and thus the operation amounts to a collective punishment. And on the other side, you can see that there is no massive arrests of Jews, Israeli settlers who came to Arab towns and cities unharmed Palestinians and damaged their properties means that it's very selective enforcement of the law, and thus it needs to be stopped immediately.
Thank you. So you've talked about this, the use of force, the use of violence, the police's uses of violence in making the arrests. And I know that you've been visiting with detainees. So will you tell us more about what their experiences have been, and also what's happening with them after they're being arrested? Are they being held in jail? Are they receiving fines? Are they being let out on bail? Please tell us.
Okay, so I have to start and to mention that throughout the couple of passing weeks, volunteer lawyers throughout the country have worked throughout the current period of emergency to provide legal advice to detained protesters and to represent them before Israeli courts as at extension and as at extension of detention hearing and on appeals. The arrests were first taken to police stations and they're going through investigations. I witnessed a lot of very horrible scenes of excessive violence toward the detainees. They were badly injured in the process of arrest, but also in the police station itself, when they were handcuffed and with no ability to resist. They were beaten by police officers, they were attacked, they were injured, and they needed a medical treatment, and so many times the medical treatment was delayed or denied even by the police officers. Some of them were released at the same day of the arrests. The other were brought to court for extensions. Some of them still in the jail until this moment. We are talking about then more than 170 indictments against Palestinians with all different kinds of charges, and these people are still in jail till now. A lot of them are still in jail until now, and request for their rest until the end of the judicial procedure. That's how they see it.
Okay, so they'll be held until their full court process is complete.
Yes.
So that was did you say almost 200 people, 170 people?
170 people are facing indictments of very different kinds of charges, and in many cases requests for arrest until the end of the procedures are being heard in the courts, and the courts are backing these kinds of requests, and many Palestinians are now in jails. We're talking about hundreds of them due to their participation in the demonstrations.
Thank you. Thank you. And on what you just said a moment ago about many of them needing medical treatment, I read today in an article in 972 magazine that Hassan Jabarin from Adalah estimated that more than 30% need medical treatment after their arrests.
Yes, yes, it's something that I witnessed in my eyes in Nazareth police stations. They were nice that when they brought to the police station more than 30 detainees, and we saw ambulances every night entering to the police stations. We have testimony of one of the paramedics that was in the police station at one of these nights, and he talked about the bad injuries. It's mainly head injuries that the detainees had, and he talked about the way the police officers treats the arrested Palestinians, and that he insisted in some cases that these people are in danger and should be now brought to the hospitals, and his requests was, as I say, denied or delayed at some of the cases.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us all of that. So we've talked about how these arrests seem to, they're geared, or they're supposed to keep people from protesting, to deter people from protesting by scaring them, or by forcing them to spend so much time and energy on the arrests themselves that the protests lose any kind of momentum or focus. Do you think that the arrests will achieve that goal?
Not at all. I think that, let's say, for example, in Nazareth, if the people went out the first day to the streets to protest against the ethnical cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah and the Israeli practices against the prayers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the second day they went out to the street to protest also against the violence they've witnessed from the police officers toward their own people in their own towns and streets. I believe that now people are not scared, but they are rather angry and more frustrated due to the excessive powers used against them, and the feeling that the state is trying by all possible means to suppress their legitimate demonstrations, and to prevent them from practicing their fundamental rights.
Thank you for that. I want to come back to this thing that you mentioned, which is this enormous lack of arrests on the Jewish Israeli side. We know that Jewish extremists traveled throughout the country in an organized way. They were organizing on WhatsApp, and they harassed and assaulted Palestinians in cities across Israel. And there have been very few arrests of these Jewish assailants, despite the fact that there are videos and eyewitnesses who have identified who they are. There's a big article today in Haaretz saying, we found these people. We found 20 people, and the police only arrested, I think 6, they said. Will you talk to us a little bit more about your understanding of what accountability looks like for Jewish citizens of Israel?
Look, this is another good example of the discrimination Palestinians face in Israel and had faced for tens of years. As you mentioned, we have witnessed very scary incidents, mainly in the mixed cities, when Jewish extremists assaulted Palestinians, attacked them in the street and in their own houses, threatened, corrupted property, and other violations. For example, in the city of Led, a Palestinian young man was killed in the hands of the settlers. Many of the incidents were at the presence of the police officers who had chosen not to intervene and protect the Palestinians. The Palestinians approached the police for protection, and they were denied. Still, we see that there were very very few arrests among Jewish peoples. Until now, we're talking about something like 180 for the whole period. On the other hand, we had 1,600 Palestinians, and almost no indictments. When we're talking about more than 170 indictments against Arab Palestinian citizens. I have to mention that we at Adalah sent multiple letters to the Attorney General and other officials in this regard since the beginning of demonstrations and asking for accountability against these extremist Jews. But till now, we still didn't receive any response to any of our letters. But it's very important to understand that what is happening is not only practices by the Jewish citizens against the Palestinians. It's more a policy made of the leaderships. There were, for example, incitements against Palestinian citizens by Israeli government officials, such as the Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's telling the police to use any force necessary, and they have the full backing, and there will be no investigations. It's a clear message that they can do whenever they want, wherever they want, and there will be no accountability at the end. Also, Public Security Minister Ohana called for Jewish Israeli citizens to help the police to use their weapons. So it shows that there's not only that there's no accountability, they're allowing people to make these violations. And as I said, it reflects a policy and also a long-term discriminations against the Palestinians.
Thank you, Nareman. Is there anything else you want to tell us? You have an American audience here listening. What else do you want them to know?
Okay, first of all, thank you for having us. I'm glad to talk about things that we are going through. We've been through very hard times the past 2 weeks. Me personally, it was very hard times and tough times for me, also as a lawyer, but also as a human being. I was staying at police stations till the very late hours of the night, seeing minors, youth activists, lawyers, college students, press being arrested, being treated violently, their rights being violated. It is something that someone should hold accountable for it, and it is something that we cannot just pass beside it and not to talk about it. The arrests here have been very violent. It is something that we have not witnessed in years, and thank you so much for this opportunity to make our voices heard. Thank you very much.
Nareman, thank you so much for your time and your energy today. I know that it is very late where you are, and you just told us what these past 2 weeks have been like for you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and to share your insights and experience and analysis with our audience, your expertise. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Please make sure to come to our website, fmep.org, fmep.org, and also to the Adalah website. There will be links on our website. And please know that FMEP plans to continue bringing you conversations with leaders from Palestine and Israel. So please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast to stay up to date. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. You can also watch these podcasts on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. Nareman, thank you. Thank you to our listeners. I am Sarah Ann Minkin signing off for now. Take care and thanks again.